All right, I might wait a little bit for everyone to come in from the waiting room. All right. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jessica Cecil. I'm the Education Coordinator at the National Aging Research Institute. Welcome to our online Seminars in Aging program. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which each of us are meeting today. For me, that is the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung people. I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands and waters across Australia. I pay my respects to elders, past, present, and to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, including members of the Stolen Generations. Firstly, a little bit of housekeeping regarding Zoom. At the conclusion of the talk, we'll have some time for Q&A. If you have any questions, you can submit them throughout the seminar using the chat function, which can be opened using the chat tab at the bottom of your screen. So today's seminar will be recorded and uploaded to our website within a few days. Please keep in mind that if you turn on your video to ask a question, that your image will be included in this recording. So today we'll be hearing from Dr. Helen Barry from the University of South Australia. Helen Barry is a Senior Research Fellow in the Centre for Markets, Values and Inclusion and Director of the Australian Alliance for Social Enterprise at the University of South Australia. She's affiliated with the International Longevity Centre Global Alliance and Life Institute at the University of Ottawa, and is a Fellow of the Royal Geographic Society UK and Life Member and past President of the Australian Association of Gerontology. Helen's research focus is on Australia's changing and ageing population and implications of this for society and communities. Much of this work involves an examination of the interaction between older people and the built environment, including age-friendly cities, innovative models of housing, community connectedness, social networks, frailty, and well-being. So today she's going to be presenting using citizen science to explore the age friendliness of cities. So welcome, Helen, and over to you.
Thank you, Jessica, and thanks for inviting me, Nari. It's always great to talk to my colleagues in Victoria, so I'm happy to be here. And it's always exciting to talk about citizen science. I never get sick of talking about citizen science. So I just wanted to acknowledge that I'm actually presenting today from the traditional lands of the Kaurna people, and that I respect their spiritual relationship to their country, and that their cultural and heritage beliefs continue to be important to Kaurna people today and in the future. As with most research, the work I'm going to be presenting today has emerged from an evolution of ideas and small projects, pilot projects, little bits of work that we've been doing, and is slowly emerging into a body of work. Most of my work as a researcher, as Jessica mentioned, has centered around the evolving relationship between people and the spaces and places that they occupy and live in. And so that influence about space, place, and the design of the built environment on how to age well has always fascinated me and been central to the work that I do. And these interests have led us down a pathway of using citizen science as a methodology to understand that relationship more deeply. So the aim that you see here on the screen to co-design, trial and validate an audit tool to be used by older community members as trained citizen scientists to evaluate their age friendliness or quality of their neighbourhoods has kind of been an overarching aim for a lot of this research. And today, up to date, we've had 3 smaller pilot studies that we've done here in Adelaide, particularly looking at public green spaces and older people and aging well. I have a PhD student who's about halfway through, who's also using citizen science to understand how we can co-design good public green spaces with older people. We have an ARC linkage that's about 6 to 9 months in, that's looking at the social value of good design and good architecture. So that's not so much about green spaces as it is about spaces that we live and work in, but also uses citizen science as a method of as a methodological approach. We have 3 major citizen science applications in at the moment. A couple of those are with NARI, so watch this space. Fingers crossed that we get one of those, and we will be working on that in the future. And we also have 2 international projects that are currently underway, one with Ottawa, Canada, looking at dementia-friendly communities, and a 10-country study led by the Netherlands, which is just about to start, which is also looking at age-friendly cities and communities. So this suite of projects really all falls loosely under that aim. But let's take a step back and look at what is citizen science. So in recent years, we have witnessed an important change in the relationship between science and society, and we've moved away from this public understanding of science approach, where as researchers, we squirrel ourselves away, we do our research, we come up with findings, and we go out and we present our research to the world as experts. So we've moved on from that in a lot of examples to a more science in society approach, where science is a more collaborative engagement between citizens and scientists working together. And we see that a lot in the natural sciences. So you see a lot of projects where people are collecting data about, say, seagrasses or rare frogs, or the bird watch in your backyard, or doing a lot of work with astronomy and understanding planets and finding stars and those sorts of things. It's just still emerging in the social sciences, and particularly in the built environment, as a valid method of doing science. So the term citizen science is used in a lot of different ways. But for the purposes of our research, we view citizen science as a partnership between professional researchers and volunteers who are living and working in our communities, where the volunteers carry out tasks that have traditionally been carried out by the scientists. So that sort of cooperation should serve 2 goals. First, it should create new scientific insights, just like any good research should. Particularly, it's valuable for gathering large-scale data or hidden data, which professionals, researchers may not be able to access alone, or could not generate on their own. Secondly, and most importantly, that partnership should produce an educational outcome for the participants. So increase their knowledge, increase their understanding or interest in science, and provide new skills. So they are the 2 core attributes at the heart of any citizen science project. But there are lots of ways that citizen science can still play out. You can have a contributive model, which is where volunteers collect data. So the examples I gave before of the seagrasses, rare frogs, your bird watch, that is citizens collecting data. So that's also known as crowdsourcing data. It is a particularly important component for citizen science, but it's not the only way of citizens to be engaged. And note that that's still different than us as researchers collecting data about people. This is people actually going out and doing data collection, not just providing data as participants. The second model is called a collaborative model, and that's where citizens might get engaged not only in data collection, but also perhaps in data analysis and interpretation of that data, as well as the data collection. The third model, which is kind of the one we should all be aiming for, in my opinion, is co-created projects. And that's where you get citizens or volunteers on board right from the beginning. And they help you to design the research questions, to develop the research design, to collect the data, to do the analysis, and to present the results. That's what I would call gold star citizen science. It happens less often. Most people tend to stop at that first level because it's easy, but I think we should be aiming higher if we're going to be doing citizen science. So how can citizen science be used to understand the age friendliness of our neighbourhoods? Well, we all know that health and well-being are determined not only by our genes and our personal characteristics and our individual behaviours, but also by the physical and social environments in which we live our lives. So creating environments that are truly age-friendly requires action in many sectors. We need a good healthcare system. We need good long-term and short-term care, good transport systems, housing, labour markets, service provision, civil society, community organisations, older people, family and friends. There are lots of actors and actions involved in creating an ideal environment for a person to age well, including all levels of government. So the key to creating age-friendly environments and understanding that is the perceptions older residents have about their own environments. So it's all very well as us as experts to sit back and decide what creates an age-friendly community, but we need to understand the perceptions of the people that are living and working in those environments. As people age, they tend to spend increasing amounts of time in their local neighbourhoods. So we know that as people retire, as their mobility decreases, as they get older, more and more time is spent in their local neighbourhood and home. So daily experience, often over really long periods of time, 20, 30, 40 years living in that neighbourhood, means that residents, older residents, have acquired deep, intimate first-hand knowledge about their neighbourhood. So they're way more qualified than planners, policymakers, local government to assess the age friendliness of those environments. And currently we have really little, a real paucity of empirical data about what is valued and what is perceived to be age friendly from the point of view of the older person. We have a great age-friendly community and cities movement, which is a bottom-up community development model around the world, but there is actually not a lot of data collected about that, about what works, what doesn't work. And there's not a lot of collated global data around that at all. So we feel that citizen science-led research with older people may prove a key to overcoming this paucity of data, while at the same time engaging older community members in age-friendly values and principles, and being able to co-design good neighbourhoods for them to live in with their local government, with their local neighbourhood, or with service providers. So although all the age-friendly city domains, and you all know the DAISY domains of the age-friendly cities movement are important, most of the projects we've just carried out today focus on outdoor spaces, indoor spaces, so buildings and green spaces and parks and streets and bus stops and those sorts of things as the built environment. We also touch on social and civic participation and elements of transport in terms of how people access green spaces or public buildings. So there are some gaps in what we've been doing, but you'll hear a little bit about the project in the Netherlands, which is hoping to be more holistic around that approach. So let's just talk about a little bit of this co-design process, which I'm really passionate about and which I think fits perfectly into the ideal of citizen science. So a lot of the work we've been doing is to co-design an audit tool for age-friendly cities. And we think that that truly collaborative experience is much richer for us and for the citizen science who are involved. And that's kind of been at two levels. So I mentioned earlier on that we'd done 3 smaller pilot projects early on. That was around ensuring that we could design an audit tool and an auditing process that worked for older people and that worked for us. And we're now going on to look at that process in our study in Ottawa and also our study across 10 countries in the Netherlands to make sure that the design of that auditing process is universal, works universally. So included in this was picking apart the age-friendly checklist that many of you will be familiar with from the World Health organisation's site. So it asks a series of questions. However, we feel they're poorly worded. There's often double-barreled. There's 2 or 3 questions in one statement. It's really hard to unpick. So we handed that to several groups of older people to unpick and co-design and turn that into a credible checklist that they could use to audit their communities. So you could tick the boxes about what is meaningful. It also gave us a chance to make sure that those things were measurable. So the questions they designed needed to be meaningful to them, meaningful to us, and measurable in the sense that they would answer the research questions we were looking for. So we read them, we pulled apart those guidelines. They were really critical of the guidelines. They felt they're dated. There are things like inclusivity and diversity, which are not addressed. There are things like climate change, which are not addressed in those original age-friendly guidelines. So they felt they needed an upgrade as well. Finance is not addressed anywhere. So financial security is not addressed in those guidelines. So there are a whole lot of gaps. So we pulled them apart, we put them back together, we developed an audit tool, they've trialed that audit tool, we made changes, they trialed it again, we tweaked it once more, and then they went out and they put it into practice for 6 or 8 weeks across several pilots. So there was a lot of co-design that went into creating a good audit tool. We've since upped the ante on the co-design process. My PhD student, Zinan Chen, is about halfway through her data collection year at the moment. They have just finished a citizen science auditing process, a group of 30 participants, older participants. So across one local government area, they've audited all the green spaces in that area. They are now going on, they've divided into 3 groups, and they are co-designing their best age-friendly park ever. We're working quite closely with that LGA, and they've given us a real park to work on, which is pretty well much a blank space at the moment, but which is earmarked for development in the next couple of years. So we've got a group co-designing. One group's using VR, one group's using AR, augmented reality, and another group are doing it as a 2D plan. And they're going to come up with 3 designs for that park. Now, this is a group who've been citizen scientists now for 6 months, looking at the age friendliness of all parks in that local government. They really know a good bench when they see one. They know a good path service when they see one. They've Googled examples around the world of age-friendly gyms. They've really, really worked hard on this. And so they have developed a really sound sort of expert knowledge in this field that they're now going to put into practice to come up with these 3 designs. While the council, of course, have not said that they're definitely going to adopt one of those designs, they are going to adopt what they can out of that design, not only for that park, but for parks across the whole LGA. So this group is starting to see some tangible outcomes from their co-design process, which is really exciting. Also, the 10-country study in the Netherlands is a lot of co-design across the 10 countries. So I cannot remember to name them all, except it's New Zealand, Australia, Canada, Russia, Poland, the Netherlands, potentially France, Turkey, Bulgaria, and there's the UK. So there's our 10, and there are others coming on board all the time. So we have worked hard to develop a survey, a validated survey tool on age-friendly cities, which we hope will provide data from those 10 countries, looking at 10 urban cities within those countries. And then we go on to a co-creation and co-design, not only using the auditing process that we've mentioned before, but then each group working with their city councils or their local governments to co-design policies, action plans for age-friendly in those areas. So that's going to roll out over the next couple of years. We're only really just getting started on that, but it's quite exciting. So just a bit about recruitment and training of citizen scientists. We found that pairing up with local government works really well. They are really interested in this stuff. They really get age-friendly cities. So they've always been really good partners. They're also the ones that provide green spaces and good footpaths. So they want those things. They understand the value of those things to living well for everybody. So we find they're really good partners to recruit. They often provide room for training. We usually give them an individualized report. So for example, one of our studies had 10 LGAs across Adelaide involved. Each LGA got their own report benchmarked against the whole project so that they could put their own results into context, which was important for them. We tend to use smartphones for our auditing process. You don't have to be a smartphone user, but it does help. It is easier. And we find more and more increasingly that older people are smartphone users. We do have a booklet that we can use instead, so it's not essential. We have provided disposable or cheap cameras, digital cameras, so that people can fill out their booklet and take a couple of photographs if they need to. But most people have a phone that is suitable for doing this work. And once we show them how to do it, that is their preference. So I'd say about 90% tend to use a smartphone when they're doing this. Training is really easy. We've trained over the phone, we've trained face-to-face in small groups, we've trained using YouTube videos, we've trained by posting a booklet out in the mail and seeing how people get on. So we've tried lots of methodologies for training. Obviously, we prefer small face-to-face groups if we can, because then people feel like they're part of a team of citizen scientists rather than individuals. And we find that they get more engaged in your project if they're part of a team, but it's not essential. The picture you see here, we trained these two guys to be citizen science in less time than it took to have a cup of coffee. Because once we gave them the link to the online audit tool, they'd loaded it up on their phones, they went outside, they had a try, they filled out the demographic survey that we give them first, and they were gone. So it's really not hard to do. It's really quite an easy process. It can take up to an hour. It's never taken longer than an hour to train a group. We also provide cheat sheets, so commonly asked questions, common issues that people have. Is there enough data? Do you have too many photos on your phone? Those kinds of things. We give people a cheat sheet, so it just prompts their memory when they go out on their own. And we always provide backup by phone and email, so anybody can email us a question. We make sure we've got somewhere who can reply promptly, but really support requests have been quite minimal over the 6 or 8 projects that we've done so far. We always like to meet with our citizen scientists afterwards, either one-to-one over the phone or as a group, to get their feedback about the questions, the process. So that's been important in building reliability, validity in this tool, but also to talk about the data. We always make sure if we get a group back together that we are presenting back to them, even if it is sort of very broad brush data, because that's when they give us more feedback and more context and they start to share ideas. So that's been a really important part of the process. The other thing we always do is give them a draft copy of the report to look through so that they can provide comments, do any editing that they want to, add any further comments in, because that's also to us an important part of that scientific process is seeing an end product. So they're always important aspects. So let's talk a little bit about the audit tool. As I've said, this has been across multiple projects, so the audit tool does vary a little bit, but the one thing it has in common is it always uses an Esri platform and a program called Survey 123. We text a web link to each citizen scientist. They upload that, or we help them upload that onto their smartphone. If you place the link on the home page, it acts and looks like an app even though it's a web link. And as I said, for those that don't want to use a smartphone, there is a booklet available. So the most important thing about using an audit tool like this is that we are able to collect real-time experiences and perceptions of the built environment. This is not a focus group where we get people back together and say, think about the last time you went to a park, or think about all the times you used the bus. This is, I am at the bus stop and this is good or this is bad. So it's real-time experiences and perceptions, and they can do that over and over and over again for different parts. They do it as part of their normal life. So we're not asking them, we don't give them a checklist of parks to go to. We just say, as part of your everyday life, go and audit your neighbourhood. So it can be the walk to the bus, it can be the shops, it can be the car park at Woolies, it might be the green space where you walk your dog every day. People can audit the spaces that are important to them. Most of that is done, as you can see here, by using Likert scales. So it makes it quite quick. There's always an other at the bottom for the things that we've missed or the weird things that people have that don't fit boxes. The audit questions cover things about the space itself. So what type of space are you in? As you see here, dog park, nature reserve, civic space. Are you at a cafe? A little bit about the facilities available. Are there toilets, shades, seating, lighting, those kinds of things? Their perceptions of the space. Do they feel safe? Is it secure? Is it user-friendly? Is it welcoming? Is it noisy, busy, green? All of those kinds of things. And the nature of that visit. So why are they there? To relax, to exercise, to meet other people, babysitting their grandchildren? How often they would visit, their frequency of visits, the length of time they'd spend there, and importantly, their mode of travel to get there. So did they walk, cycle, drive, use public transport? Critically for this data, and you'll see this in question 2 on the screen, it geocodes where you are. So it will, just like Google Maps, it'll find where you are as long as you've got your location data on. People don't want to put their location data on. We show them how to move the map around and find where they are. You can type in an address, so it will find it that way, and it will pinpoint exactly where you are. So for us, it is time-stamped, date-stamped, and geocoded. So we know exactly where that green space is that they're talking about. We know the time of day they were there, the day of the week. We can match that to weather data. We can match that to busyness of roads, all sorts of external data sets that we can match that data to later on. It also has a qualitative component. So people, that's not going to show us. We'll have a look in a minute. So people can upload 2 photographs. Under those photographs, they can put a comment to provide context for that data. They can also put 1,000-word comment at the bottom to contextualize something they might want to tell us about that space. So that provides us with both quantitative and qualitative data about that space. It sounds complicated, but honestly, once people understand the questions and they're used to answering those questions, it's an average of 7 minutes to fill out an audit. So they don't take a lot of time. Although people have told us that they get quite obsessed about doing the auditing, and their family get really annoyed when they say, no, we can't go yet. I've got to do my audit on this space. Or they're getting their phone out at lunch in a cafe, and that's rude. You should put your phone away. So quite often people are making mental notes. I must come back and do an audit of this space later when I've got more time. But they do get really enthused about doing them. So one of the neat things I said is that it's in real time and it's geocoded. So as soon as they hit submit on their audit, we get a red dot on a map back in the office. So in theory, someone could sit there all day and watch red dots pop up. In practice, we go in maybe twice a week and sort of see where our audits are happening. We can see who's auditing it. So everybody gets an ID code. And if I hover over one of the red dots on the maps, it turns blue, as you can see here. And the data on the left of the screen shows you what ID 131 has said about that space. So this is one of our audit tools, and it tells you what they've found in that space. We know exactly where they were. If we were to look on the computer, we could see the time. You can download this as an Excel spreadsheet. You can put it into SPSS. So it's very compatible with you able to look at sort of upscaled aggregated data. And as you can see here, this person's uploaded 2 photographs from that site, and then they've put a little comment in about that. So we've got that qualitative data as well. And as I said, we're able to link that to weather data. We're able to link that to traffic data. We're able to, that map is just like Google Maps. We can put satellite images there to see how green that area is, what the land use mix of that area is. So we're able to really do a deep dive beyond what that group is telling us. So this is the audit locations from one of our smaller studies that we did called Green Adelaide. We had 9 participating councils, and this was done in 2020, early 2020, when Adelaide went into a first lockdown, which was nothing like what you guys put up with. But for us, it was that very first lockdown. No one knew what was going on. Everybody was a little bit overly cautious about what they should do and where they go, and we were just at home. We were halfway through data collection, and we just thought, okay, this is it. This project's out the window. But the beauty was you were allowed to go out to exercise. So people continued to produce data for us right through that first lockdown. And in fact, we got some really valuable data about the meaning of green space and nature at a time when that was the only outside connection you could have, and people were emotionally stressed by what was going on. So there were key things here. We had 44 citizen scientists, but they collected 600 audits over 6 weeks. Now that's the kind of data that, as a small group of 3 researchers with $30,000, we were never going to be able to collect that amount of data. So they did an amazing job in collecting a huge amount of in-depth data for us over quite a short period of time. They overcame a lot of obstacles, as I said, for example, COVID during this period. And they had a lot to contribute beyond that. So when we were able to get back to them one-to-one via Zoom at the end, they were able to provide us with a lot of context about that data. So you can see you can have really rich data sets, pretty simply rolled out and fairly economic, which is often really good for us as researchers, where we don't have big endless budgets to go and do things. One of the other bonuses of collecting this data is to be able to aggregate it. So for example, I can look at all the data for women, all the data for people over 80 living alone, drivers, non-drivers, people with chronic illnesses, people without chronic illnesses, because we ask all those questions in that first demographic survey. But one of the things that interests me, and this kind of takes me back to my PhD days, is understanding the life spaces of individuals. So for each individual, that dot in the middle of the spider map is where they live, and these are the green spaces that they've accessed during that survey. So we get an understanding of, well, how do people travel to these spaces? Why are they going there? What does neighbourhood look like for an individual? We know it's not bounded by a local government area. It's not bounded by geography necessarily. It's a combination of things that creates a neighbourhood. So we're able to do that, and by looking at these individual life spaces and correlating that with their background information. But another aim of the project is to have citizen scientists utilise that data to ground truth age-friendly principles. So by going back continuously to those age-friendly guidelines and saying, what does it mean to be able to walk, you know, safely to an environment? Is it about lighting? Is it about footpaths? Can you forgive those things if there's a good vibe for where you're going, and that overrules things? You know, is this green enough to be considered a green space? Those sorts of things. So they start, what we find with our citizen scientists, they start to put that age-friendly lens over every part of their life. So that's where that education and understanding science comes back. You start to be a critical thinker about your environment, not just someone who grumbles about something on the, out there. So we can start to apply critical thinking to age-friendly neighborhoods, and this group get really good at doing that. As I said, we can collate data. I've forgotten the word that I need. And we've sort of looked at broad negative issues and broad positive issues by looking at that correlated data. So what was not welcoming were things like trip hazards. So for us, one of the big things in the middle of the city is the e-scooters that are left everywhere, and they're quite heavy. So people said, even though we know it's not necessarily, they're blowing over in the wind, it's not that anybody's just left that lying there. They're really quite heavy to pick up. So a lot of older people said, I would happily pick it up and get it out of the way, but it's too heavy for me to move. Uneven pavers, steep steps to entrance, cluttered and unsafe footpaths, seating that's exposed to weather and therefore uncomfortable to sit on, or seating that's not well placed, were all things that came up again and again and again. But there are obviously good things about our environment too. So things like spaces that encourage community engagement, communal seating and tables that encourage people to mingle, spaces that are intergenerational, artwork that is a point of interest, things that are fun in the environment, like hopscotch on the footpath, or those bouncing trampolines that are at ground level, which some playgrounds have, that all ages can use, were seen as exciting and fun ways to be able to support community that is age friendly. So just the last couple of slides. This is looking at one of our other aims from these studies, which is to understand the citizen science process and how it can help people to create better communities to age well. So this is an example from my PhD's research in our recent getting our citizen science. We have a group of 30 citizen scientists who've been auditing their neighbourhood for the past 6 months, not continuously for 6 months, but in summer, winter, autumn, they've been auditing, so over different seasons at different times. And they are now about to start this co-design of a new park. So the council kindly provided us with a couple of buses, and we took people on a tour based on their citizen science audits. We went to a couple of really high-ranking age-friendly spaces and a couple of low-ranking age-friendly spaces, so that they could all have a look together and discuss what was going on. So this is part of that co-design process. This group are really passionate about seeing this project through. So we thought we would, after the first stage, we might lose a whole heap and we'd have to re-recruit. But in fact, they've all stayed on, and we've been able to divide them into 3 groups to play that out in looking at different co-design practices to create age-friendly environments, and they've just started that work. The second is our ARC linkage, which has been going for about 9 months. As I said, this is in the U City building in Adelaide. If any of you are coming to the AAG conference, this is where the conference dinner is going to be, at this building, and we're hoping to be able to show people around a little bit. So in this one, we are exploring the social value of good design in architecture. So I'm working with a bunch of architects and urban planners to look at this. We have a cohort of 50 citizen scientists who live and work in this building. The top floors are a retirement village. The middle floors are disability accommodation, short and long-term disability accommodation. There is some short-term stay for everyone. Then there is the Uniting Community offices. They have a couple of commercial tenants. So a law firm takes a couple of floors. There's a dentist and a few other commercial tenants. Conference space, and then down the bottom is some commercial tenants like a cafe, a restaurant, a Goodwill store, and some public spaces. So we are following this building through for the next 3 years to get an understanding of how a mixed use vertical building can be a community. How do you create community in these spaces? What is the value of public spaces or semi-public spaces within this building, and how are they used? So you can see the picture on the right with the Friday craft group or art group that turn that rather corporate lobby into a messy community space at least one day a week, which means that there are kids running around. There's a lady who brings her cockatiel down for a little bit of socialization. People sit and read. We do different craft activities, weaving, knitting, felting, painting, all sorts of things happen in that space. So we're looking at those sort of actions and how they can create community within that building. And key to that are the citizen scientists who are feeding back daily data about what it's like to live and work in that building. Part of that is monitoring building performance. This is a 7-star rated building that's carbon neutral. So we want to get an understanding of how that impacts on how people live their lives and how they view living in that building. So there's quite a bit going on there. As I said, we've only just got started. Our citizen scientists have been out for a couple of months now. We hold monthly meetings with them. Sometimes we're feeding back data. Sometimes we're having a conversation about the process. We're taking the coders, the citizen science to the next level with this. And we have a group of citizen scientists who are co-authoring a paper at the moment on their own, not with us. So there are a few residents and workers in that building who wanted to write a paper, academic paper, and they're hoping to come to us next year to the Livable Cities Conference in New York and present that paper. So there's some exciting things happening, taking citizen science to a new level there as well. And as I said to Jessica earlier on, I'm more than happy for anybody to contact me. I'm happy to share slides. All my notes are under the slides, so you can have all the information. If you want to give an age-friendly citizen science audit tool a go, just copy that link into your phone and it should lead you, I think it's still open, to an audit tool that you can have a go at and see how it works. All I'd suggest is for ID number put 9999 so that we know you're not one of our real citizen scientists in a project. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Helen. We now have some time for Q&A, so if you have any questions, you could submit them now through the chat function. Alternatively, if you'd like to ask a question in person, you could turn on your camera and microphone and we'll be able to call on you in turn. So, Bryony, do you have a question for Helen?
I do. Hi, Helen.
Welcome back, Bryony.
Thank you. Lovely to see you. And thanks for your amazing presentation. I've got to say, it sounds like a lot of fun. This work, not only for the citizen sciences, but for the researchers as well. I was just curious about the extent to which they or you give feedback to all the places that they're going around to so that they can make themselves more age friendly.
Sorry, the feedback to...
So back to the cafe that's got a rubbish entryway but is otherwise friendly, or so the businesses and places or the the Adelaide bus service, or whatever they're interacting with.
We certainly haven't done that, and that's a really good point. I'm not sure if they do that, if they make those sorts of comments back individually to those groups or not.
It seems like it'd be a good opportunity to improve their age friendliness,
absolutely,
just organically, because they're getting the feedback. And as you say, they become critical thinkers.
Absolutely.
It's fascinating work. Thanks for sharing.
No, it's a really good point that maybe we should be including a feedback process to encourage people to do that and to train them how to do that. Jessica, can I just take 1 minute? I'm being super grandma today and I'm babysitting and I can hear a crying baby. So I'll just bring her back and then I'll be back. 2 seconds.
While we wait for Helen to get back, Ellie, have you turned your camera on because you are waiting to ask a question?
No, just had my camera on the whole time.
All
So,
good.
Jess, can you put that in? I can't work out how to put that into the chat, that link, so that we can all go and have a go.
Oh, yep, we can just copy that out and put that into the chat.
Thanks.
Welcome
Sorry
back.
about that. She's supposed to sleep for another hour. Okay, all done.
Well, while we wait for anyone else to cover question, oh, Bryony, did you have another one? You've turned your camera.
No, I was just going to say, as soon as you bring a baby in, you probably won't get any more questions about your work. Don't compete with babies and animals. Yeah, I mean, I guess until other questions come up, I've got lots more. I'm really interested. We're also trying to work with our co-designers and volunteers on engaging them more in the process of, I guess, dissemination of the findings. So it's great that is that been like this their idea to come up and write an academic paper, and how are they going about that, and where do you think they might publish? And
yeah, well, the where they're going to publish and what the article's going to be on is yet to be decided. I must say that this is a group living in this U City building who it does include a lot of writers, artistic people. So there's a few in that group who are really confident writers. There are also a couple of ex-academics living in there. So I think they're driving this process, if you like. So I guess it's a hand-picked group. But with our other project, for example, the Unley project, which are just regular citizens living there, we have suggested to them that they present their park designs to the council and at the end of the year, and they're putting their designs up in the library for a public vote as well. So it is teaching them the skills about, well, how would you present that? And how would you stand up and give that presentation? So that's quite time intensive. So as part of a PhD, we've got time to sort of say, okay, let's practice your presentations. What are you going to say? There's usually one or two confident people who are happy to get up and do that. But the academic paper caught us by surprise. We were mentioning that we had a series of paper and they just volunteered. They said, we'd love to write a paper. So we're just going to work with them and see how that happens. So I'll let you know, but they're quite keen. They're really, really keen to, from their perspective, what it has meant to move into a carbon neutral net zero building and how that's influenced their lives, the way they live their lives in that retirement village. So yeah, wait and see, I guess, for that one.
Frances, did you have a question you'd like to ask Helen?
Yes, I did. Thanks, Helen, for that presentation. It was fantastic.
Hi, Frances.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
I was just wondering, to what extent can we use this kind of approach to capture information from people who are kind of more frail, and I guess that these people are ones who are going out already to a greater or lesser extent, but we have housebound individuals and so on. And
absolutely, yeah. So each time we've tried to attract a cohort of people who have mobility issues, who don't get out. The project, which I probably didn't mention much because I'm kind of on the fringes and it's very new in Ottawa, is looking at dementia-friendly communities. So we are pairing people with a carer or a family member to be able to collect that data on behalf of that person while they're out and about. So that might be about visiting the doctor. It might be about, getting to the shops, what's age friendly about the shops, those kinds of things, rather than walking to the park or using public transport on their own. We've also, with our Netherlands group and a group in Poland, look at pairing social work students or OT students with an older person with frailty, with early onset, early stages of dementia, to be able to collect data with them. And that helps the student to understand the perspective of the frail older person, as well as collect data about the context that that older person has lived in. And that worked quite well as well.
Yeah,
that
sounds great.
pairing
Yeah.
of students.
Yeah, sounds fantastic.
We actually did it here as a photo voice project too, which is slightly different. But we did pair photography students with older people living in a retirement village and ask them the brief for to be a professional photographer, you need to understand a brief. And their brief was get to know this person and find out what it means to live well in a retirement village, and then produce a series of photographs that represent that for the older person. The older person then wrote a diary around those photographs. So it was much more qualitative, but it worked really well, that pairing of students and older people.
Great, thanks.
Got a question coming in the chat. Jess asks, did the data you receive indicate any tensions between user groups in parks? I know during lockdowns, our green spaces got packed with conflicting user groups, such as people versus baby people versus boot camp people.
We didn't know, that never came up for us. But then again, we weren't as in lockdown as long as you, so, or as often. So maybe we didn't get to the point of any tension. Most of our people that are co-designing that we talk to about the park spaces really wanted them to be intergenerational spaces. So they've been very conscious about not just suggesting changes, like gym equipment. This comes up because yesterday we spent a whole afternoon looking at seating and gym equipment with one of our co-design groups. They were really keen on gym equipment that suited a whole range of people. And the one that they ended up picking was one that they felt grandchildren could play on and enjoy as a play space, but was safe enough for older people and challenging enough for older people to also exercise on. And that it didn't take up any space that other people might want for kicking a football. It needed to be placed in the park that didn't impact on a space that could be generically used. So they were pretty mindful of the fact that parks needed to be for everyone. And I think that's come across most of the time. The one thing they don't like are the child locks, the really high gates with the lock at the top, because a lot of older people find it really hard to reach up that high and open the gate. And we've mentioned this to the council, and they kind of a light came on that, yes, it's keeping children in, but they didn't realize that it was actually keeping people out of the parks at the same time. There's a certain cohort that just can't do that. So I know. So there are some elements of park design, I suppose, that are excluding certain groups, but older people in general really just wanted to have an inclusive environment for everyone.
Great, thank you. Bianca, do you have a question you'd like to ask Helen?
Yes, I do. Hi, Helen.
Hello, Bianca.
A great presentation. Look, just picking up on that point about trying to create inclusive spaces also, I wonder if you had any reflections in your with your citizen sciences and engaging with those scientists who are perhaps research naive or who've never undertaken research.
Yeah.
And if there was any kind of suspicion or concern amongst those groups about, what's the data we're collecting and why, and perhaps how you went about allaying those concerns.
So that's a good question, and it's certainly a part of the training. So a lot of the training package is about what is good science. Why do we need ethics approval? What is a good photograph and a bad photograph? So if you're taking a photograph, make sure there aren't people who haven't given permission to be in the photograph. Don't line your grandchildren up. Don't, put your husband in every photograph. Just be careful about what you're doing. So we do go through a lot of those sort of data scientific processes early on, so that it's quite clear about that this is not just fun. It is science. We want good data. We want to be able to use your data. It needs to be credible. You know, don't skip questions. Why we don't want you to skip questions, all those sorts of things. So I guess we do spend a bit of time on that on the beginning. But I guess at the end of the day, the people who sign up are the ones who are going to be interested in science in one form or another. So that kind of rules probably a cohort out that aren't as interested in that scientific process. Self-selection, I guess. Yeah.
And I love your grandson, so cute.
Yeah. I'm going to be in so much trouble when her mum gets home and she hasn't had a sleep.
Okay. Well, if there are no more questions for Helen, could everyone please join me in thanking her with your clap reactions? So our next seminar is going to be on the 8th of November, where Dr. Vera Costa from Monash University will be presenting mental health outcomes of family carers during the transition of their family member to residential aged care. So please join us next month on Tuesday, the 8th of November at midday. And thank you all very much for attending today's seminars in aging.
Thanks for having me.